Hi, class. Welcome back. Let's take a look at the characteristics of the living human organism. So, all living things are going to have certain characteristics that are going to differentiate them from non-living things. So, life processes in humans are going to include metabolism. And when we think of metabolism, metabolism has different components to it. One's called anabolism, and the other is called catabolism. And when you're in a catabolic state, you're in the process of breaking down. And when you're in an anabolic state, anabolism, that's when you build up. So even if you think about the concept of digestion, you're breaking down food in your mouth only to digest them, break them down to anabolize to build up your body tissues. So things in the body are always breaking down and building up. Your skin cells break down and build up. Your red blood cells break down and build up. Your hair, you lose them and you make more. It's like Doritos, right? Don't worry, we'll make more. It's the same concept. Responsiveness, movement, growth, differentiation. That means that cells can differentiate and change into something else. And reproduction. Here's a term you're going to hear a lot about, homeostasis. Homeostasis is a condition of equilibrium or balance, but it's a dynamic state of change. It's a dynamic state of change, meaning your blood pressure is not always 120/80. You're not always breathing 14 respirations per minute. Your heart rate may not always be 72 to 90 beats per minute. So homeostasis is if I'm running, well, that may go up. And then when I slow down, it can go down. When I'm meditating, this can go down. When I'm running and exercising, this can go up. So homeostasis is when you're eating food and you're drinking a soda loaded with sugar and pasta and rice and bread and bagels, right? All the stuff with sugar, sugar, sugar. Your sugar's going to skyrocket, but then your pancreas kicks in, pushes out some insulin, and then your blood sugar comes down. That's homeostasis, your body keeping it in balance. So homeostasis is maintained by the body's regulatory processes. Now, body fluids and homeostasis. So the survival of our body cells are dependent upon the precise regulation of chemical composition of their surrounding fluid. And their surrounding fluid is called extracellular fluid. So if this is a cell and this is a cell, if these are all different cells with nuclei in the center, everything between them, all the fluid between these cells are called extracellular fluid. If we're talking about the fluid within the cell, then we use a different word. If we're talking about the stuff in the cell, then we say it's intracellular. So intracellular fluid is the fluid in the cell. Extracellular fluid is the stuff between the cells, also known as interstitial fluid. So extracellular fluid and interstitial fluid are the same. Intracellular fluid is the stuff in the cell. So if you look at what happens here, well, here's the outside, here's the external environment. Well, here's the integument. This looks like it's probably the skin. And now look, we have oxygen coming into the lungs. It finds a way to bring the oxygen into the blood. And from the blood, oxygen goes into the cells. Remember the cells, you have your mitochondria, they're going to utilize that oxygen to produce ATP, to produce energy. And the byproduct of that energy production is called carbon dioxide. We don't want carbon dioxide building up in the blood. If you have too much carbon dioxide in the blood, then in terms of pH, it goes from 0 to 14, and 7 is in the middle. This is your acid. This is your base. Just remember A comes before B, left to right, acids and bases. If you have too much carbon dioxide in your blood, your pH moves this way. Not good. Your pH drops. The pH of the blood, which is supposed to be 7.4, starts to move. So we have to find a way of getting that carbon dioxide back to the lungs so we can push it out. And in the blood, we have nutrients, and the nutrients are finding a way to nourish the cells. And in the blood, we may have some nitrogen wastes. Nitrogen wastes are from the breakdown, not of carbohydrates, not of fats, but protein. When you break down protein, which are amino acids are made up of nitrogens. Now, carbohydrates and fats, these are just made up of carbons and oxygen and hydrogen. These are very, very easy to get rid of. It's very clean. But protein is made up of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. And we got to get rid of the nitrogenous waste products. So it's got to find another way to kick them out. And it's going to use the kidneys and urine to push them out. And whatever nutrients that the body doesn't need, it'll find a way of eliminating it through wastes. Okay? Now, when we talk about homeostasis, I'm not going to show this live, but you can go back in the PowerPoint, and as long as you're connected to the internet, you can click on this video by Pearson and watch a 2-minute video on the regulation of blood sugar. It is really neat, but it just happens to be an example of a feedback loop. Okay? Now, feedback loops could be either a positive or a negative feedback loop. Now, feedback loops are a type of stimulus that comes in and it disrupts the homeostasis by either increasing or decreasing the controlled condition. Whatever that controlled condition may be, they're monitored by certain receptors. Maybe the receptor is saying, hey, the blood sugar is too high, or the blood sugar is too low. Blood pressure is too high, or blood pressure is too low, right? Those are receptors. They receive information. They're going to send nerve impulses or chemical signals, right? Either the endocrine or neural system will send that received information to the control center. The control center that received the input and provides nerve impulses to the effector, which is usually a muscle or a gland or an organ, and it brings about a change. The response that alters the controlled condition. So if the blood pressure was too high, now it's going to lower it. If the blood sugar was too low, now it's going to raise it. And once that environment changes, it's going to send that information back to the control center, returning it, saying, okay, we've now returned to balance, to homeostasis. So there are negative feedback loops, and there are positive feedback loops. The majority of the feedback loops in the human body, the majority of them are negative feedback loops. When it's a negative feedback loop, it doesn't mean it's bad. The negative doesn't mean it's bad, and the positive doesn't mean it's good. They both are good. But the negative feedback loop, I want you to think opposites. So whatever the environment currently is, the negative feedback loop will bring about the opposite condition. So if you have high blood sugar, your body will find a way to lower it. If you have low blood sugar, your body will find a way to make it rise. If your body temperature is too low, your body has mechanisms to try and increase it. So that's what negative feedback loops are. It's always doing the opposite. In this particular case, there was some sort of stimulus that came in, it disrupted the homeostasis and increased the blood pressure. So something is going on, and we have receptors in the neck, and we have receptors in the blood vessels and receptors in the heart. And it's going, hey, blood pressure is too high. Let's send it to the neural system. Let's send it to the brain. The brain goes, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to send out nerve signals to both the heart and the blood vessels to create a change. And that response is going to decrease the heart rate, and it's going to open up the blood vessels and dilate them, so that the effect will be you went from high blood pressure, and the end result was that it lowered the blood pressure. Okay? But this could be true with blood sugar, heat, temperature, thermoregulation, anything where it makes it opposite. Now, the positive feedback loops, these are going to be the same. Not opposite, but I want you to think the same. Whatever the condition currently is, the body brings on more of that. It brings more of that. We see these in more life-threatening type of conditions. So a classical example is labor and delivery. So what happens is when a woman is pregnant and it's time to deliver, the woman is going to experience pain, and she's going to have contractions. Pain and contractions. What happens is when a woman feels pain, those pain signals get sent to the neural system and the endocrine system, and it's going to send out nerve impulses and hormones that are going to go to the myometrium, or the muscle of the uterus, and create more contractions. But the more contractions she has, the more pain she's going to experience. And the cycle keeps continuing. More pain, more contraction, more contraction, more pain, more pain, more contraction, more contraction, more pain. It wants to bring this on and on and on and on, more of the same, until the baby's delivered. Okay? And it's only at that time of delivery, after the baby is delivered, that the condition changes and reverts back to a negative feedback loop, because she doesn't need the uterus to contract anymore. Okay? So positive feedback loops, classical example is for labor. Negative feedback loops are going to be for most of the feedback loops in the body. When homeostasis is disrupted, it can result in disease, a disorder, and even death. And some factors such as your genetic makeup, the air you breathe, the food you eat, right? The air you breathe, the food you eat, even your thoughts, this is part of your epigenetics. So your epigenetics control your genetics, meaning just because you have the BRCA gene for breast cancer doesn't mean you're going to get breast cancer. Your epigenetics control that. Now, if you're living in a condition that has lots of pollution, you're consuming lots of fried foods, lots of sugary foods, lots of greasy foods, excessive amount of sugar, alcohol, smoking. Now, those are poor lifestyle choices that can certainly damage and open up the gene for breast cancer, for sure. Now, I want to give you another example of a positive feedback loop. Now, although labor and delivery is obviously necessary, here's another type of feedback loop that can actually hurt us and kill us. So let me show you. In anatomy 2, we'll get into blood vessels. But if we look at, let's say here's a blood vessel, right? That's a blood vessel, but we're going to look at it this way, okay? And when we look at this side, that inside where blood is flowing is called the lumen. So let's look at the lumen. And the lumen's going to have 3 tunica layers. Tunica means layer. So the 3 layers. There's going to be an inner layer that looks like this, right? So the dotted one, that's called the tunica interna. And then we'll make a middle one like this. And that one is called the tunica media, like middle, also known as the tunica musculosa, tunica media or tunica musculosa. And I like musculosa better because it tells us that this is muscle. And we know what type of muscle surrounds blood vessels, smooth muscle. And then we have this outermost layer, the straight line, right? So that's 1, that's 2. And the third layer, that's going to be the tunica externa, because it's outside. It's easy, right? Tunica externa is outside, tunica interna is inside. And sometimes the tunica interna is also called the endothelium. Sorry, let's try that again. Endothelium. Endothelium, I-U-M. Endothelium is the tunica interna. And it's that layer, the tunica interna, that's very easily damaged. Damaged by what? If you're a smoker, it breaks down this layer. If you're a drinker, it breaks down this layer. Fried foods, sugar, certain medications, oral contraceptive, certain antidepressants. These things damage the tunica interna. So what happens? Now, before I get to what happens, remember in blood is not just red blood cells, but blood's going to carry cholesterol. And we know that there's good cholesterol, and then you guys think this one's bad, right? The H for happy, those are the good ones, and the L for losers, they think the LDL are the bad ones. They're both good because you need them both. You need LDL cholesterol because that's how you're going to make estrogen and testosterone and all your sex hormones. You need LDL cholesterol for that. Now, the problem is when the LDLs become damaged or oxidized. What is oxidized? If you bite into an apple and you look at the apple, it's white, but then within 5, 10, 15 seconds, the apple turns brownish, it rusts. That's called oxidation. Now, if you chop up a vitamin C capsule or tablet, you bite into the apple, take the powder from the chopped up vitamin C tablet or capsule, and put it on the part of the apple that you bit, and you watch what happens, it doesn't rust. It doesn't oxidize. Why? Because vitamin C is an antioxidant, meaning it's against the oxidation. So it's very important for us to consume foods high in antioxidants, which happen to be the rainbow, right? When you eat the rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, right? When you eat Roy G. Biv, those are all have lots of antioxidants, all those colors. Now, cholesterol doesn't stagnate in the lumen. Your cholesterol actually goes in between the endothelium and goes back into this layer. This is where cholesterol lives, back in here, not in the lumen. So let me change the color here for a second. And we'll make this a little bit darker. So now let's say this is LDL. And this is LDL cholesterol back here. And we'll put them in these cells. And now they become oxidized. So I'll put a big X in there. They become oxidized and damaged. Your immune system doesn't like that. So what does your immune system do? Your immune system comes in and it's going to protect them. It's going to protect your body. It's going to wall these off. It's going to collect all the damaged cholesterol and pool them together. And at the same time that you're smoking too many fried foods, sugars, this stuff here, the endothelium starts to get damaged. So that part of the membrane breaks down. Okay? So when that breaks down, and you have all this LDL cholesterol in here, what ends up happening is that layer, that's the smooth muscle layer, this starts to move inward. Right? Because that barrier is no longer there, so the smooth muscle invades. And now what we are left with is a lumen that now, instead of being nice and smooth and round where the blood flows, it's very irregular and jagged. And due to the fact that it's very irregular, narrow, and jagged, what the body does is the body says, you know what? The blood flow through here is very, very turbulent. Here it's very smooth, but here it's very turbulent. And if it's turbulent, the body interprets that as blood loss, like I got stabbed or I got shot, or there's some ulcer somewhere in the body and I'm bleeding internally. And if it's turbulent blood flow and I'm losing blood, a positive feedback loop is going to kick in to lay down some fibrinogen or some fibrin. And fibrin is a clotting protein. And fibrin keeps laying down. A positive feedback means the same. It's going to keep on laying down fibrin. It's going to keep producing this fibrous layer. Fibrin. It's positive feedback loop, positive. And it only stops when a complete clot is formed. And if that happens to a blood vessel that's going to the heart, and the heart's not getting the oxygen that it needs, that's a heart attack. If it gets stuck going to the brain, then that's a stroke. Okay? That's why certain positive feedback loops could be very, very damaging, especially in the instance of strokes. Now, in healthy people, if this is happening, this takes years to develop. And as a clot is starting to form in healthy people with time and exercise, with those two things, the body can make a detour. It can actually make additional blood vessels going around that. We call that collateral circulation. The body can actually make collateral circulation, which is a detour. It's blood that's going around that. How cool is that that can happen? Okay, good place to take a next break.